Have scientists just discovered evidence of a forgotten civilization right here on our own planet? Beneath Turkey lie structures that, according to modern historical accounts, shouldn't exist. In the Caucasus, there's a shaft that has stumped scientists for decades. An entire vanished land once lay in the middle of the North Sea, and now even NASA researchers are asking, what if we aren't the first civilization on Earth? Buckle up, folks. Today's gonna get really wild. Feel free to let me know what you think in the comments. What existed before our civilization? Could a civilization have emerged and crumbled to dust over the billions of years that Earth has existed? And if questions like these fascinate you as much as they do me, please go ahead and subscribe to the channel. It really helps me out. And if you're already subscribed, giving the video a thumbs up really helps. But now let's get to the big question. Was there ever a technologically advanced civilization on Earth before us humans? After all, our planet is about 4.54 billion years old. Homo sapiens, on the other hand, have only existed for about 300,000 years. That's plenty of time for other civilizations to have emerged before us, right? NASA scientist Gavin Schmidt and astrophysicist Adam Frank investigated exactly this question in a scientific study. The two wanted to find out how one might detect extraterrestrial civilizations on other planets. And to do that, they first had to understand what kind of traces an industrial civilization actually leaves behind in a planet's geological record. Earth is the only planet we can study, so they asked, if a technological civilization had existed on Earth 100 million years ago, would we still find any evidence of it today? They called this line of thinking the Silurian hypothesis, named after a fictional species of lizard from the TV series Doctor Who. In their study, they do not claim that a prehistoric civilization actually exists. They apparently had to make that point extra clear so that no one would get any silly ideas. But the question remains fascinating nonetheless. After all, if we were to search for our own traces in the distant future, what would remain of us? The answer is sobering. Not much. Our cities? For the most part, crumbled to dust after 10,000 years. Even concrete gets worn away by wind and weather. Human fossils, extremely rare. The odds of a single human being fossilized are about 1 in 100 million. The further back in time you go, the more blurred our view of the past becomes. The oldest large expanse of Earth's surface that hasn't been eroded away is the Negev Desert, and it's just 1.8 million years old. So if a civilization had existed 100 million years ago, the chance of finding anything would be practically zero. But, and this is where it gets interesting, certain chemical traces can survive for much longer. When you burn coal, oil, or gas, you release carbon that has been trapped underground for millions of years. And this carbon contains a specific signature, carbon-13, so scientists could search for carbon-13 anomalies in ancient rock layers. And that would be an indication of massive fossil fuel combustion. That could at least be a clue to the existence of a civilization that engaged in industry and energy production. However, there's a problem. Massive volcanic eruptions can also alter carbon levels, so we would still need other concrete evidence. For example, toxic chemicals that do not occur naturally, so-called persistent organic pollutants, or extremely high concentrations of heavy metals such as lead, mercury, or chromium, which are produced only by industrial processes. And indeed, there is one event in Earth's history that looks suspiciously like industrial pollution, the Paleocene-Eocene thermal maximum, or PETM for short. This occurred about 56 million years ago. Within a very short time, global temperatures rose by 5 to 8 degrees Celsius. The oceans became acidic. Calcium carbonate, the stuff that shells are made of, dissolved, and between 30 and 50% of all life on the seafloor disappeared. Carbon levels in rocks dropped by over 3 per mille, exactly as one would expect if someone had burned huge amounts of fossil fuels. Sounds like an industrial disaster, doesn't it? Probably not, because here's the catch. The PETM lasted between 1,000 and 6,000 years. We humans have released the same amount of carbon in just 200 years. Furthermore, scientists found no traces of plastic or synthetic molecules during the Pyramid. Instead, they found large amounts of mercury with an isotopic signature that points directly to volcanic activity. And now another complication comes into play, the problem of preservation. Land surfaces erode far too quickly to preserve deep history. About 15 billion metric tons of the Earth's surface are eroded every year. After a few tens of thousands of years, everything will be gone, including cities, structures, and pollutants. So maybe we should just look in the water? Underwater, it's quiet and undisturbed, and sediments are deposited layer by layer. A perfect geological archive, right? Unfortunately, not quite. Anything in the oceanic crust older than 170 to 200 million years has disappeared. Tectonic plates pull it down into the depths, where it melts and becomes new rock, like a slow conveyor belt into oblivion. And then there's the sustainability paradox. The longer a civilization survives, the more sustainable it must theoretically become. But the more sustainable it is, the smaller its footprint on the planet. So the civilizations most likely to survive in the long term are precisely those most likely to disappear completely from the geological archives. Ironically, a collapsing civilization might leave a larger footprint precisely because it failed. So the truly unsettling thing about the Sidor hypothesis is this: it cannot be disproven. If a civilization existed millions of years ago, the evidence would be subtly scattered and incomplete, perhaps buried so deep within the Earth that we'll never be able to find it. There's no way to say definitively that it didn't happen. So the idea behind the Silurian hypothesis isn't all that far-fetched, especially when you consider what archaeologists have unearthed in the southeastern part of present-day Turkey. For thousands of years, everyone thought it was just a grassy hill with sheep grazing on it. Then in 1994, the German archaeologist Klaus Schmidt read some old reports and became suspicious. So he went there himself, and as soon as he reached the top of the hill, he knew he'd stumbled upon something big. Beneath the surface of the hill, in some places so close that plows had already damaged the tops, lay enormous T-shaped stone pillars. Some of them were over 5 meters tall and weighed up to 10 metric tons. And they were artfully carved, decorated with reliefs of foxes, lions, scorpions, snakes, and birds. Although the researchers found stone tools, blades, and hammers, they found no signs of settlements. No houses, no refuse pits, no fire pits for cooking. Instead, they discovered tens of thousands of animal bones, all from wild animals. No domesticated animals, no cultivated plants, just Stone Age tools. And here's the kicker: radiocarbon dating showed that these structures are about 11,500 years old, twice as old as the pyramids of Giza. Based on everything we thought we knew about human history, this place, called Göbekli Tepe, shouldn't even exist. First came agriculture, then people were able to settle down, build cities, and only then did they have time for religion and monumental structures. This sequence made sense and was supported by countless pieces of evidence. And then came Göbekli Tepe, shattering this entire beautiful theory completely because it was built by hunters and gatherers who didn't even have metal tools. Klaus Schmidt was convinced that this was neither a village nor a city. It was a sanctuary, a religious center to which nomadic groups from across the region made pilgrimages to perform rituals. With pillars weighing 10 metric tons, using only muscle power and skill, they cut these colossal pillars from the limestone bedrock beneath the hill and moved them. Schmidt discovered that the site consists of several layers. The oldest dates from around 8,300 to 7,500 BC and consists of large circular structures. The more recent layer is about 1,000 years younger and features smaller, rectangular structures. And here's the mystery: the older structures were apparently intentionally buried. Why remains unknown. The geometric arrangement is particularly fascinating. In 2020, researchers analyzed the architecture using computer algorithms and discovered that 3 of the stone circles form an almost perfect triangle with sides 19 meters long. Schmidt himself believed that Göbekli Tepe was a pilgrimage center to which people came from all over the region. The tens of thousands of animal bones that were found may be the remains of ritual sacrifices or evidence of large feasts, or both. But here comes the plot twist. When plans were made in 2017 to build a massive protective canopy over the site, archaeologists had to dig much deeper than ever before. And there, several meters below the surface, they found something unexpected: evidence of houses and permanent settlement. A massive cistern, channels for rainwater, and thousands of grinding tools for processing grain. Does that mean the original idea was wrong? No, because the builders of Göbekli Tepe still did not live in an agricultural society. Although people were experimenting with plants, they were still primarily hunters and gatherers. The new interpretation is even more fascinating. Göbekli Tepe may have been a last-ditch attempt by a hunter-gatherer society to preserve its way of life, while other groups were already domesticating animals and cultivating plants. The message: we are different, we belong together. And Göbekli Tepe was not alone. Turkish archaeologists have since discovered dozens of similar sites in the region, all featuring T-shaped pillars from the same period. One of them is called Karahan Tepe, located 40 kilometers away, and it might even be older. It features 266 T-shaped pillars, circular houses, and ceremonial structures. All of these sites were deliberately buried and abandoned at some point. We may never know why that happened. After more than 25 years of excavation, there are more questions than answers. Who were these people? What rituals did they perform? Why did they build these structures only to bury them? But one thing we do know, these people were more like us than we thought. Stone Age people who built monumental temple complexes without any agriculture, without any cities, and without any metal tools. That's fascinating enough, but deep in the Caucasus lies a story that sounds as if it came straight out of an adventure novel. A Russian speleologist named Arthur Chemukov was exploring the Khara-Khora mountains in the North Caucasus. This region lies between Russia, Georgia, and Azerbaijan, a wild, rugged area full of glaciers, steep mountains, and deep valleys. And right there, he found a hole in a mountainside that led deep into the earth. It wasn't an ordinary hole in the ground or a natural cave, but something that immediately struck him as strange. He organized an expedition with other speleologists. They rappelled down, and what they saw left them in awe. The walls of the shaft weren't just rock. They appeared to be made of perfectly hewn stone blocks, fitted so tightly together that you couldn't even slip a knife between them. A bit like the pyramids in Egypt, the shaft is said to go down to a depth of 800 meters, and at the bottom, there is said to be a huge underground hall, perhaps even an entire system of tunnels. Chemukov was convinced that he had discovered an archaeological sensation here, an ancient, highly advanced civilization that must have been capable of constructing such a structure. But this is where the story takes a mysterious turn, because Arthur Chemukov wrote extensively about his discovery in his diary. He documented everything meticulously, made sketches, took notes, and then the diary disappeared. Chemukov himself died in 2015 under mysterious circumstances. He was struck by a car at night while walking home drunk from a bar. The waitress at the bar later reported that Chemukov had been unusually agitated that evening, as if he could barely sit still because he was on the verge of revealing something big. Was Chemukov silenced because he had found something he wasn't supposed to find? After all, Chemukov wasn't the only one interested in the Khara-Khora shaft. A group called Cosmopolite, a Russian organization that investigates mysterious phenomena, also conducted expeditions to the shaft. Its founder, Vadim Chernobrov, confirmed in an interview with Russian media that his team had indeed descended into the shaft and found a large chamber at the bottom. But Chernobrov too died of cancer in 2017, just 2 years after Chemukov at the age of 51. Yet another mysterious death linked to the shaft. And then there are the Nazis. In October 1942, during World War II, the German Wehrmacht advanced through the Caucasus. They conquered cities and secured strategically important areas, but perhaps they were also searching for something entirely different. For at the summit of Mount Khara-Khora, a swastika carved into the rock, bearing the date October 28, 1942, is said to be visible to this day. That was exactly 1 day before the German army captured the nearby city of Maikop. It's no secret that the Nazis were obsessed with occult theories. They believed in a lost Aryan super-civilization. So it's entirely possible that they found the Khara-Khora shaft, perhaps they even tried to descend deep into it. There's also a theory that the shaft was built by the Soviet Union. A Reddit user named Longpickle claims to have heard from a former Soviet soldier that the Khara-Khora shaft was part of a secret Soviet project, perhaps as an underground military base, a research facility for seismic activity, or a weapons depot. However, there are no Soviet documents whatsoever that would confirm such a project. And then there are the really out there theories. Some believe the Khara-Khora shaft is part of a planetary weapons system, a kind of resonance machine capable of channeling planetary energies. So maybe the whole thing was a weapon of an ancient civilization, waging war against someone else, aliens for example. Of course, they're a staple of this kind of story. Before we all get completely carried away into the world of crazy hypotheses, let's take a step back and look at the facts objectively, because as fascinating as all these theories are, the most likely explanation is actually the most boring one. The Khara-Khora shaft, if it really exists as claimed online, is probably a natural geological formation. I know that sounds totally unspectacular. The mountains in this region of the Caucasus consist of volcanic and metamorphic rock, mainly shale, limestone, and granite. These types of rock tend to fracture along straight lines when they cool or shift under pressure. A perfect example of this is Devil's Tower in Wyoming, USA. It's an ancient volcanic core that formed perfectly hexagonal columns as it cooled. Something similar could have happened at the Khara-Khora shaft. The rock fractured along a massive fault, shifted, and left behind a long, narrow cavity. Chemical weathering caused by water could then have washed out large corridors beneath the shaft, which in turn altered the pressure on the rock above and led to further cracks. It looks man-made, but it isn't. No ancient power plant, no Stargate, no weapons system, no secret Nazi project, no Soviet bunker, just a damn cool cave. From these legends to concrete, measurable facts, even the good old Pyramid of Cheops still poses a mystery to science after more than 4,600 years. The Pyramid of Cheops in Egypt is the oldest of the 7 wonders of the ancient world and the only one that still exists today. About 2.3 million stone blocks, originally nearly 147 meters high, and although the region around Cairo is anything but earthquake-free, the pyramid still stands today like a rock in the desert, literally. Yet several earthquakes have shaken the region over the past centuries. In 1847, for example, there was a 6.8 magnitude quake with its epicenter about 70 kilometers away. Then in 1992, an even closer one, a magnitude 5.8 quake with its epicenter right near Giza. During that quake, some of the remaining capstones actually fell from the upper parts of the pyramid, but the interior of the Pyramid of Cheops remained intact. Not a single crack, no damage, nothing. How is that possible? A new study published in the journal Scientific Reports finally gives us an answer, and it has to do with something very few people would have expected: frequencies. Egyptian and Japanese scientists, led by geophysicist Mohammed El-Gabri of the National Research Institute of Astronomy and Geophysics in Cairo, set out to do something unusual. Instead of digging or scanning, they listened. Using highly sensitive accelerometers, they recorded vibrations at 37 measurement points inside the pyramid, in the chambers, the passageways, and on the exterior masonry. And the scientists stumbled upon something completely unexpected. Every building has what's known as a natural frequency, that is, a specific vibration rate to which it reacts particularly sensitively. When an earthquake wave matches this exact frequency, the vibrations amplify each other. This is called resonance, and it's pretty much the worst thing that can happen to a structure. That's exactly what happened during the devastating 1985 earthquake in Mexico City. The high-rises there had a natural frequency that, by chance, matched that of the soft ground perfectly. The result was catastrophic. Hundreds of buildings collapsed. With the Pyramid of Cheops, however, the opposite is true. Measurements show that the pyramid's masonry vibrates at a natural frequency of about 2.3 hertz. The ground beneath and around it, on the other hand, vibrates at only about 0.6 hertz. That's a difference by a factor of 4, so when the Earth trembles, the pyramid simply responds at a completely different frequency. The seismic energy, so to speak, passes right by it without causing any damage. But that's not all, because the researchers have discovered something else that is at least as remarkable. This natural frequency of about 2.3 hertz isn't just a random value found somewhere in the structure, it's the same everywhere. In the king's chamber, deep inside, in the narrow passageways, on the outer shell at various heights, everywhere, scientists measure values between 2 and 2.6 hertz. This means that dynamically, the pyramid behaves like a single homogeneous body, not like a pile of 2.3 million individually stacked stone blocks, but like a monolith. The ancient Egyptians, whether consciously or not, got almost everything right during construction. The mass of the pyramid is concentrated at the base and decreases continuously toward the top. The geometric center of gravity and the so-called center of resistance lie almost at the same point. This minimizes torsional forces, that is, the twisting of the structure, which is particularly dangerous during earthquakes. In addition, the pyramid has no recessed corners, in other words, no places where stress could build up, and the broad foundation on the hard limestone bedrock of the Giza Plateau gives the entire structure enormous stability, and it gets even more fascinating because so-called relief chambers were found inside the pyramid. These 5 cavities, stacked one on top of the other, are located directly above the ceiling of the king's chamber at a height ranging from just under 49 to 61 meters. Archaeologists have long been aware of their mechanical function. They distribute the enormous weight of the stone masses above them and prevent it from being concentrated at a single point. However, the new measurements now show that these chambers apparently also serve a seismic function. Normally, with structures, the higher they are, the more they vibrate during an earthquake. This is also evident in the pyramid. Up to a height of just under 49 meters, the relative vibration amplitude increases with height. But then, in the relief chambers between 49 and 61 meters, this value decreases again. The geometry of these chambers apparently actively dampens the vibrations. Whether this was intentionally designed by the ancient Egyptians or is a fortunate side effect of load distribution, the researchers cannot say with certainty. They speak of a possible connection, not of proven intent. What remains is a monument erected 4,600 years ago that the Earth has simply been unable to shake since then. Sometimes rock endures for millennia, while at other times an entire country simply vanishes without a trace into the sea. Imagine if 10,000 years ago you could have walked from the European mainland to England without getting your feet wet. No English Channel, no stormy North Sea, just vast fertile land as far as the eye could see. That was Doggerland. The name comes from the Dogger Bank, a sandbank in the North Sea named after the Dutch fishermen, the Doggers. As early as the 17th century, they were fishing there, unaware that they were casting their nets over a sunken world. At the time of its greatest extent, about 10,000 years ago, this landmass covered 45,000 square kilometers, according to the latest estimates. It stretched from the east coast of England to Denmark and southern Sweden. Great Britain was not an island back then, but a peninsula connected to the European mainland. Why was it all dry back then? Quite simply, we were at the end of the last ice age. Gigantic glaciers had trapped unimaginable amounts of water, and sea level was about 120 meters lower than it is today. As the glaciers retreated and the climate became milder, a true oasis of life developed on Doggerland. The landscape was likely incredibly diverse. Modern seismic surveys have shown that there were forests, vast grassy plains, lakes, rivers, and even steep limestone cliffs. A huge freshwater lake collected the waters of the Rhine, Meuse, and Thames and flowed into the Atlantic Ocean west of what is now the English Channel. It was a paradise for Stone Age hunters and gatherers. But did people really live there? Most likely, yes. The first evidence came in 1931, when a fishing boat pulled a carved antler tip from the sea 40 kilometers off the coast of Norfolk, a 12,000-year-old harpoon. Since then, fishermen have repeatedly recovered tools, animal bones, and even human remains from the North Sea. In 2013, they even brought an 11,000-year-old skull bone to the surface. But the truly spectacular discoveries were made by researchers at a site called Boldner Cliff off the coast of the Isle of Wight. Here, at a depth of 11 meters, archaeologists found a veritable time capsule. Over 1,000 artfully crafted flint tools, remains of fire pits, and more than 100 wooden artifacts bearing traces of workmanship. Even more fascinating, DNA analyses of the sediments revealed traces of einkorn, one of the oldest domesticated grains. This means that the people of Doggerland had already been in contact with the first farmers of southern Europe 8,000 years ago. But nothing lasts forever, and as we know today, this Atlantis of the North Sea eventually sank beneath the waves. This is where the story gets truly dramatic, because about 8,200 years ago, a catastrophe struck. Off the coast of Norway, a gigantic section of the continental slope slid into the sea. The Storegga Slide, as researchers call this event, was colossal. 3,500 cubic kilometers of material plummeted into the depths, triggering a mega tsunami that swept across the North Atlantic coast with waves up to 20 meters high. Doggerland was also hit, and for a long time, researchers thought that had been the final end. The latest research by Vincent Gavney and his team shows that Doggerland likely survived this tsunami. Traces of DNA in sediment layers prove that, above the tsunami deposits, evidence of plants and animals was found once again. This means that part of Doggerland may have continued to defy rising sea levels for centuries as an archipelago of islands. It was only about 7,500 years ago, as sea levels continued to rise, that even these last islands disappeared forever beneath the waves of the North Sea. Since then, the sea has hidden all traces of this sunken world, just like Plato's Atlantis. I hope you're just as dizzy as I am right now, considering how many unsolved mysteries our own Earth's history still holds for us. If you can't get enough of topics like this, please subscribe to the channel. It really helps me a lot, guys. And while we're on the subject of groundbreaking discoveries, something earth-shattering may have just happened in physics as well. Apparently, there's been a real breakthrough in the study of anti-gravity. You can see what the researchers have discovered in the video that's now displayed in the top right corner. Be sure to check it out. It's super exciting. As always, there's another science and space topic in the bottom right corner. Otherwise, I'd say see you in the next video. Take care, everyone.